First of all, thanks to Javeri family for having me here. Thanks for Ankurji for coordinating, and Neeraj, thank you for having me here. So, in a way, my talk is more of a continuation to the current panel discussion that we're having. That India में हर sector में इतना बड़ा opportunity है, and but the problem is we get excited about everything. कोई नया पॉलिसी अनाउंसमेंट आ गया, कोई एक्विजिशन हो गया, कोई टेक टाइप हो गया, and suddenly we feel okay as if there is no tomorrow. We just jump onto that opportunity and we think बस यही थीम है, because we are always excited about something new. But for things to work out, for economic policy to work out, it takes time. Even when a promoter starts a plant, वो plant में machinery order करेगा, that machinery will come on time, that plant will get stabilized in time, then the ramp up will happen, he will get correct engineers to run the plant, he will have laborers to process the plant, he will have customer acceptance, there will be no product defect liability, whatever. So there are so many things which are involved in a real life business, but we get excited way too ahead and give really premium valuations to businesses which are yet to prove their mettle. And that's where as Pankaj said, landmines happen. So for things to work out, you need economic policy, opportunity, capital, talent, everything to come together. That's when any sector or any sectors will fire up. Because India में काफी sectors में काफी time से opportunity. For example, let's say space sector. We are one of the five countries globally who have capabilities in space. But even today, the sector is by and large is not investable for many of listed space में तो नहीं है, right? Because the companies are still emerging. But if you had a view 10 years back, India के space sector में काफी तोड़फोड़ होने वाला है, you wouldn't have made money. So you have to understand that piece as well, and bet on the promoters who are ready for the opportunity. जिन्होंने the sectors which are going to emerge, जहाँ capacities लगा के रखी है, anticipation में काम किया है, those companies are the ones which will benefit. For example, solar industries की बात हुई थी. They did a 500 crore capex in 2017-18 in defense, when defense was not even a word. The domestic procurement norms for defense came in 2016-15 when Manohar Parrikar was there. But the policy started playing out after COVID, and solar benefited after COVID. But the promoters saw the opportunity, did the capex way back in advance. He had the balance sheet to do the capex, and he had the balance sheet to wait for the opportunity and prepare for it in advance, and they benefited in a large way. So whoever latched on to that opportunity early on, they benefited the most, and not now. So that's the point. That's a broad point I'm going to drive home. So I'm going to talk about three sectors. One sector which is already playing out. Second sector, जहाँ पे recently कुछ policy announcements हुए and things have started moving. And third sector where things might emerge after 4 or 5 years, but it's a big area of focus and it's a big opportunity for companies which are in that ecosystem, right? But before that, I'll just talk a bit on how policies take time to evolve. So this is 1978. This is Deng Xiaoping, then Chinese premier. He is visiting Matsushita factory. So Matsushita is nothing but, we know it as Panasonic today. So Panasonic was the world's leading electronics consumer goods company way back. So when he visited the plant, he saw fax machines being assembled. He saw microwaves. He saw very basic equipments being assembled. And he told Mr. Matsushita that you are the god of management. Why don't you come to Japan and set up a factory? Why don't you come to China and set up a factory? So he said, okay. Then he went back to Japan. He tried to convince a lot of other industries to go to Japan, to China. After 2 years, in 1980, he called up Deng Xiaoping. None of the Japanese companies are willing to come to China. It is too early. It's a communist country, unproven, etc., etc. So sorry. Deng said, okay, fine, we are still good friends, no worry. Finally, things started moving in 1985 when Matsushita proposed to set up a picture tube manufacturing plant in China. 21 inches का जो टीवी आता था तब, उसके अंदर जो कलर टीवी का पिक्चर ट्यूब है. And finally that plant was up and running in 1987. Even then, US had an issue because they didn't want Japanese to transfer some of the technology or critical materials to a communist country, because China was a communist country. So then there was another year of delay. Then finally 1988 onwards the ramp up happened. So I'm just saying, from 1978 to 1988, it took 10 years for a simple picture tube factory to be set up in China. But then what happened? So this is 45 years later. So Japanese were the largest car makers globally. Today, China, this is as of 23. China may be today around 40% plus ho gayi, if we see the recent traction in EVs. So that's how things start. You know, जैसे अभी बात हो रही थी कि mobile as a category is now larger than automobiles, right? But मोबाइल का तो अभी हम सिर्फ असेंबली कर रहे हैं, बट उस असेंबली के पीछे जो इकोसिस्टम खड़ी हो रही है, दैट इकोसिस्टम इज गोइंग टू सपोर्ट मल्टीपल न्यू इंडस्ट्रीज. एंड सी अगेन व्हाट हैपेंड इन चाइना. जिसकी लाठी उसकी भैंस, दैट्स द ग्लोबल रूल. सो टुडेज वर्ल्ड, or a lot of policies that we see in today's world, or today's global economic order, is ruled by US for obvious reasons. But this order was set up during 1930 to 1960s, when US was almost 45% of global manufacturing. So today China is headed there. So are we looking at the same regime, or the regime is going to change? It is still an open question. So at some point in time, like not way back, just 25 years back, most of the countries had China had US as their largest trading partner. Today it's China. But how did they get here? It took them 4 decades. It's not an overnight journey. So in 1990s, they became the world's factory. Before that, they had some basic industries in place. Then GATT happened, WTO reforms happened, China entered WTO, right? And then things started with assembling things. A lot of global companies started going to China, and then that led to the value chain being developed. Then they also developed capital-intensive industries like steel, manufacturing, automobiles, etc. And this led to a wave of urbanization. Hundreds of new cities got developed in those 15 years. It didn't happen overnight. And as an effect, China, maybe agri-mechanization happened after 2005. Agri-mechanization opportunity in 1990s se thi, but it happened at a certain point in time when the labor shortages started. Then 2005 to 15, they went for upgradation and indigenization. How can we indigenize whatever we are importing? So in early phase, they did a lot of tie-ups, imported technology, did technology transfer, JVs. 2005 to 15, they kind of focused on indigenizing the stuff and started building some advanced manufacturing capacities. 15 onwards, the thought process was, okay, let's dominate the global landscape. And that's where we are. And their global diaspora played a major role. So whatever the students which went to China to study in 1980s, 90s, 2000, they came back to China and they contributed to the society in a big manner after 2015, when the government intent was in place. So this is where they are. In 2015, they said, okay, we are going to focus on 10 high-end manufacturing areas and we will just dominate them. And see, today, in last 10 years, they are one of the leaders in green technology, graphene, even high-speed railways. I'll talk about it a bit later on. So what now? Now they are talking about getting into commercial aviation, semiconductors, AI, robotics. And the pace at which they have done, I think they'll get there. So far, if you look at the track record. Now, where are we? So I've just kept the ऊपर वाला जो timeline है वो मैंने same रखा है. And what are the challenges that we have? So the red ones are the things that we don't have. And the black ones are where we have some or the other presence. Right? So those are some of the advantages. So for example, we have a very robust digital infrastructure in place. If you look at Jandan, Aadhaar, Trinity. We have a very talented global diaspora. If given a local opportunity, they'll come back. Right? But we are yet to start fixing our social infrastructure, other things. But the good thing is the assembly ecosystem has started coming to India. And we already have a large industrial base in automobiles and other heavy industries. But for us to become a consumption-oriented economy, first of all, we have to create many consumers. So in my view, currently the opportunity in consumption is sectors which are moving from unorganized or companies which are getting unorganized stuff into an organized space. GST hai, baki compliance norms hai and all those things. But for a wave of consumption to get unleashed, the way we see consumerism in global markets, or in China, or in Japan, or in Western world, wherever we travel, that kind of consumerism, I think we are still few years away, maybe a decade away. So this is the average consumption of a rural and an urban household. So even in this richest 20%, most of the companies are focused on focusing or targeting 5% amongst these richest 20% households. That's where the consumerism is happening currently. But in a large section of society, it's still not happening yet. So the point is, we need industries which will lead to more job creation and more employment absorption, more skilling. And the government seems to have realized it. So I've just cumulated the central government capex over the last 20 years. So 2005 to 2014, our total capex spent in those last 10 years, how much the central government spent on capex. Usually our capex goes in four segments. One is railways, second is roads, third is defense, and fourth is loans to state governments, which state governments then further spend. So it's more or less a proxy to government priorities and what's happening. So we spent 12.5 lakh crores, 2005 to 15. 2015 to 24, we spent 52 lakh crores, cumulative capex. Even in this decade, the priority was roads, railways, defense, and giving money to state governments. But in next 10 years, what's going to happen if you look at the GDP growth predictions and all? So we are going to spend at least 220 lakh crores on capex, the government funding, which will have further amplifications in other sectors. Usually the rule is, जितना भी central government spend करता है, उतना state governments plus private sector match कर लेता है. So, but will the breakup of this 220 lakh crores be same? So if you look at the recent budget speech, so the finance minister basically put a break on three sectors. Highways and railways were two of them. That okay, these sectors are now maturing. अभी इनको यहाँ से आगे ज़्यादा funding की ज़रूरत नहीं है. But other sectors are starved of capital, so let's give money to those sectors. So for example, अभी semiconductors के लिए capital subsidy आ रहा है. You can get almost 50% of your capex is coming as subsidy. So वो पैसा कहाँ से आ रहा है? That incremental money is moving from traditional sectors to the newer sector जहाँ employment creation की काफ़ी ज़रूरत है. जो इंक्रीमेंटल 220 लाख करोड़ का भी यहाँ से आगे जो स्पेंड होने वाला है, उसमें आई डोंट थिंक द ब्रेकअप विल बी 1/3 रेलवेज, 1/3 हाईवेज, 1/3 डिफेंस. इट विल बी न्यू सेक्टर्स विच विल ऑक्यूपाई दैट पाई. And these are the sectors where I think we have the capabilities, we have the industrial base, we have the engineering ecosystem, and now we have a huge electronics assembly chain which will support these sectors. But not everything can be government driven. Government is just a catalyst in all these things. Ultimately, it's the entrepreneur who will have to execute. So we will have to back entrepreneurs who have seen multiple economic cycles and who have the balance sheet, who have the hunger, and who are ready for that opportunity. So these are the three areas by which I think the government will play their role as a catalyst. One is they'll promote new sectors, which we are seeing they are promoted electronics in a big way, and by and large, we are headed there. Currently, we are doing 20% value addition. Eventually, we'll go to 40%. Eventually, we'll have 70, 80% value addition and have the entire ecosystem developed. Similarly, they are promoting, let's say, semiconductors for now. Then there is another opportunity for the government to become efficient. So, for example, PPP. I mean, the first PPP project happened in India way back in 1998. It was a 12-kilometer road project in Madhya Pradesh. Today, we are building 30 kilometers a day. So, things happen, but they take time. Or there are other models. So, there are 400 plus district hospitals in India. Some are being run by private sector. Or there are some diagnostic services which are being outsourced to private companies, wherein they are managing, diagnostic operations in a government hospital. So models are emerging in this sector just by making the government delivery, or just by helping the government to make their delivery efficient. And third is government will have to play a role as a catalyst in innovating new sectors, in promoting sectors which are trying to do innovation, and also do some large scale greenfield projects, because the private sector cannot take that risk. But at the same time, even corporate India is ready. So the government is doing its own bit, but even corporate India's balance sheet is in a much better shape. So you look at the debt to equity ratio of all the company, it is almost at a 10-year low. Then you look at the absolute terms में अगर देखेंगे तो private sector का capex बढ़ रहा है. But if you look at it as a percentage of EBITDA or cash flow from investing as a percentage of cash flow from operations, वो number अभी भी उतना नहीं बढ़ रहा है. So because private sector is still hesitant to unleash the capex wave, or maybe most of the large industrial houses are still present in old economic sectors, and the newer players are taking some time to pick up. But that will happen. There is enough credit which is available in the system. So just yesterday, a big development has happened. I just added this slide at the last minute. This is ANRF, Anusandhan National Research Foundation. This is Mr. Shiv Kumar, who is the chairman. He's ex-GE, ex-Microsoft, and he has spent almost all his career overseas. So he is back to India. Almost basically, देश का काम करने के लिए आए. So he is heading this committee, which is chaired by the Prime Minister himself. तो ANR दो type का R&D funding होता है. One is academic, and second is for things for a technology which is ready, उसको commercial बनाने के लिए जो funding लगता है. So one piece is academic funding, for which the government is going to spend 50,000 crores over the next 5 years. So they'll fund multiple institutions, etc. Then there is an RDR scheme under ANRF. So they are going to spend, so government has just yesterday they have approved 1 lakh crores for this scheme, and they are going to spend 20,000 crores every year. So it's going to be a fund of funds. So ANRF will be like an AIF, which will be investing in other AIFs. So they can fund this sector, or they can even give unsecured loans to industries. So these are the 8 levels of technology. Basically, this gap, they call it as valley of death. That's where most of the R&D is initiated in institutions, but it dies down because it doesn't have money to get commercialized. So that's what this fund, that 1 lakh crore fund, is trying to do. If you look at our R&D spend as a percentage of GDP, it is only 0.6%. If you look at other countries, we are in the range of 2.5%. But it takes time. Even in 1995, Chinese were spending the same amount of money, 0.5% of GDP. Today, they are at 2.5. But it took them 30 years to get here. So we are also headed in that direction. So this is the rough breakup of our current R&D spend as a nation. 1.5 lakh crores, out of which 1.1 lakh crores is the government itself. इसमें आपका DRDO भी आ गया, ICMR आ गया, agricultural institutes आ गए, all those things. Private sector spends 40,000 crores, out of which 25,000 crores is pharma. And non-pharma industry-oriented R&D is only 15,000 crores, which I think is going to double in this year or next year, in next 2-3 years itself. So it's a huge jump. I mean, it also indicates the aggression with which the government has sensed the importance of this. So this is where the current profit pool of multiple industries lies. So even today, it is dominated by traditional industries, private sector banks, PSU banks, NBFCs, IT, oil and gas, etc. If you look at the emerging sectors, the new sectors, I mean, see, aerospace or defense, they're still what? 1.5% of the overall corporate India's profits. So we have a good combination wherein there is the emerging sectors have a large addressable opportunity going forward. And those profit pools are going to expand. But at the same time, it's not going to be Amrit Kal for everyone. Right? So I just compiled a simple data of last 20 years. 2005, our GDP was $600 billion. Today we are at $4 trillion. So 7 गुना GDP बढ़ा है. आज हम क्या स्टोरी सुनते हैं? We are going to be a $20 trillion economy. 2047 will be Amrit Kal, and everybody is going to grow. So each and every company is getting a premium valuation. Even if it's a tier 3 supplier to a railway company, वहाँ पर भी आपको 50 का PME stock मिल रहा है. So we should be very wary of, where are we giving the valuations, to whom we are giving the valuations. So this is just a simple data of companies with a sales of more than 50 crores. And the starting point was 2005. So out of 1200 companies, only 520 companies grew at a sales CAGR of more than 15%. Why 15%? आज आप किसी भी कंपनी से मिलो या उनकी कमेंट्री पढ़ो या एनुअल रिपोर्ट पढ़ो, हर बोलते हैं 15% ग्रोथ तो कर लेंगे. 15% ग्रोथ तो हम ग्रांटेड लेते हैं आज. दिस इज 2005 to 15, when the base was much slower for a lot of companies. 2015 to 25, only 16% companies grew at more than 15% sales CAGR. So even though the external opportunity is large, not every company is going to grow. So you have to choose your companies very, very carefully. Just by getting the sector right, you're not going to make money. You need the sector, and within that sector, you need to have the right promoter in place. So that's why at least our approach is, or best thing for investors to do is at least look for somebody with a credible track record, जिसने 2-3 economic cycles देखे हुए हैं. क्योंकि you meet so many companies who have barely spent 5 years in the markets, or the company was started in 2016-17, they have some small plant which is up and running, अब तक 20 करोड़ का ही gross block खड़ा किया है. Now suddenly they are asking for 200 crores of money from investors. So we need to back promoters who have spent at least some time in the industry. That is where your odds of success will be high. Because a lot of companies are raising money in this environment because they can, not because they want. तो अभी मिल रहा है पैसा तो ले लो, प्लांट खड़ा करते हैं, फिर देखते हैं क्या करते हैं. There are so many stories like that. I think the story, this entire IPO boom, I mean, I'm not saying every company is bad, but out of 10 companies, let's say 2 companies अच्छी है, but 7-8 companies तो थोड़ा संभल के ही रहना चाहिए. That has been the history, and I think it will not be a different story this time around. So again, one of the sectors which I think where things have finally fallen in place, this opportunity was always there since last 20 years, is aerospace. Government का भी काफी importance है यहाँ पे, because it's a dual use space or technology we can call. Civil में भी इसके applications है, और defense में. Capability is more of a strategic in nature, right? And aerospace के लिए जो भी ingredients चाहिए, you need material, men, machines, we have everything. Some of the materials we still have to import, but do we have design capabilities? Yes, we have high-end engineer. I mean, in fact, for a lot of global OEMs, the design happens in India, even for aerospace industry. Complex tooling, we have a huge industrial base because the automobile industry in India is fairly mature. So tooling capabilities hai. Then now the electronics are getting developed. So you will have avionics, you will have wire harnessing, you will have PCB modules, displays. Those capabilities will come after next 5 years, if not now. So we are headed in that direction where the value addition in this segment will keep going up. Right? A lot of spillover from automobile and space, because this auto space, aerospace, there are a lot of commonalities when it comes to execution. At least on the engineering talent front. So my point is the talent pool is available. Right? And we already have a foot in the door in this sector. So in fact, a very well known large automobile company, for example, let's say Motherson Subi, they do 1800 crores top line in aerospace, and they got there like what? It's not even a decade. And we are going to be the one of the largest civil aviation markets globally. So if you look at the order book of Boeing and Airbus, total 15,000 crores, 15,000 planes are on order backlog, out of which 1,500 are placed by Indigo and Air India and other guys. And at the same time, there are serious supply chain issues in the global ecosystem, because after COVID, a lot of workforce went out of factories, which never came back. So the suppliers of Boeing and Airbus globally are struggling to deliver on time. Hence, the ramp up is also not happening. So the backlog keeps building up. So even in aerospace, there are three parts. One is the aerostructure, जो plane का बाहर का body होता है. Then there is engine, and then there is avionics. So engines is a very critical technology. IP led है. वो इंडिया में आने में काफी time है अभी. Even players are reluctant to do technology transfer agreements or GVs on that part. So we will get some ancillaries here and there. But aerostructure is a low hanging fruit. So aerostructure में usually OEMs do 40% of the work in-house, 40% they outsource to tier 1, and then 20% they are okay with working with tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. So this 40% piece itself is worth few $1 billion. That is where a lot of companies have proven themselves in Indian landscape. So if you are present in one program, let's say you are making one component for Boeing or for Airbus, and if you have made it consistently for 10 years, then they will start giving you other components. So that's how companies with proven capabilities will get more and more components to work with. And if they don't have the capital, they'll find the capital because they have the capabilities or they have proven themselves for well over a decade. Then second lowest hanging fruit for us is going to be avionics. It's too early because usually companies outsource 60%, 80% of their avionics work, Boeing and Airbus globally. But in India, currently that ecosystem is not in place, but that will happen. We are getting there. Plus, avionics में आपको क्या होता है, एरोस्ट्रक्चर तो जब नया प्लेन बनता है तभी लगेगा, लेकिन एवियोनिक्स में अपग्रेडेशन साइकिल भी चलते रहता है. इवन अ 20-year-old plane might want to upgrade to latest stuff. So that's how avionics, in my view, can be a better business going forward. Now we look at the OEMs. What are they doing? So Airbus had 15,000 suppliers globally in 2020. Today they have 18,000 suppliers. So they're scouting for new suppliers. India mein they had 50 suppliers. Today they are 120. Boeing again same. In India they had 200 suppliers in 2020. Now we have 300. So the number of suppliers, number of companies operating in this space continues to go up. Now look at who all are present in India and the kind of exports they are doing from India. So these are the OEMs or companies who are getting things done in India and exporting. Okay, almost all of the global major OEMs have started doing some or the other work in India, if not everything. And look at the kind of work they are doing. Some components for avionics, some components for landing gears, aerostructure. So it's across the board. It is not just in one category. That's why I say the things have started moving and it is gaining some critical mass. Again, you look at the companies which are working for these OEMs. And there's a huge host of companies which are present in the space. Listed, unlisted, dono mein hai. And we can see Tatas, Mahindras, and the other names who are there in this space. Then the second sector, I feel, just last week. So again, going back to that point. So I think this industry's time has come. Things have already started playing out. There is enough industrial base to support the development of this thing. So we are at a take-off point, but it doesn't mean कि कल ही जाके सब कुछ ले लेना है. The valuations are definitely not in favor. So काम करके रखो. You develop your conviction. You watch the promoter. What do they say versus what do they do? Are they maintaining balance sheet discipline, etc. And then whenever the valuations are in favor, on that day you don't have to think. You don't need any further more evidence to build your conviction on that day when the valuations are there. Second industry where I think things have just started moving and we will get somewhere in the next 3-4 years, if not more, will be shipbuilding. See, this is the current structure. China dominates most of the industry. China was non-existent 30 years back, just like it's the case in most of the sectors where they were not present and now they are dominating. So in fact, China's largest shipbuilding company built more ships or the more tonnage than the entire US did since Second World War in just 1 year. So that's the head start which Chinese shipyards have, or the advantage today they enjoy. Right? So, but the thing is, China is focusing on, let's say, auto carriers or LNG vessels or other high-end ships or container ships, Panamax ships. So larger ships and complex designs. Koreans are good in LNG ships and other very specialized ships. Japanese are again doing some other specialized work. Europeans are good in cruise liners. So the low-end work, the bulk carriers kind of work, वो इंडिया में आने का काफी स्कोप है, for which we have started getting inquiries. And do we have the capacity to have a shipbuilding industry? So shipbuilding में basically 1/3 is steel. You need cheap steel, which we already have. We have almost 180 million tons of installed steel capacity. We are headed towards 230, 240 by 2030. So all the major companies are doing. So availability of steel, cheap steel, is not an issue. Most of our industries are very well integrated. Then 1/3 is labor. So labor availability is there, but skilling, training, upgrading them will take time, which the sector has started doing now. And third is the fit outs. You need engines, you need electronics, etc., which are anyways, you have to buy it out from outside. So that we can do. And eventually, even in that 1/3 fit out part, we can keep going backwards and develop that capacity as well. Since we have capacity, we are building capacities in other sectors. So again, this is how Chinese shipbuilding plan evolved. They did certain things to promote the industry in 2001 to 5. So even that industry took 20 years. It was 20 years in the making. It is not that policy announce ho gaya aur kal se kaam chalu ho gaya. So if you compare Chinese and Indian landscape today, so what we are doing today will resemble with what China did during 2001 to 5. Right? So again, the next sector. So again, how to play this is because we are not sure how big the sector will get. Again, the policy intends to, promote 4.5 million tons of tonnage, gross tonnage shipbuilding capacity. They have just announced 70,000 crores of incentives for the industry, which will be spread out over the next 10 years. So this 4.5 million tons is still 1/3 of China's single largest shipyard. So even after spending so much of money, we are aiming to achieve 10% of Chinese shipbuilding capacity. So it is still way too early. But how do we play it? So there are other consumable industries. Let's say that shipbuilding needs a lot of fabrication, a lot of stamping, a lot of welding. So are there any companies which are present in this space, in the ancillary space, which are already having cash flows from their existing operations, and whenever this opportunity comes up, they will have another leg up and then they will grow. So maybe that's a better way to play this industry, because we don't know what will do well. Let's say we have to build shipyards first. So who will build the shipyard? That is yet to play out. We'll need large scale 5/7 commercial shipyards. So India has defense shipbuilding capacities, but we haven't proven ourselves in merchant shipbuilding capacities. So we need shipyards, right? Then even for others to get interested and order ships from Indian shipyards, you need to provide financing. So that piece is not solved yet. So whether it will be the shipyard which will benefit, or the shipbuilder which will benefit, or the ship liner which will benefit, or a financer will benefit. So that it's like a moving train. We don't know. So it's better to play via ancillaries. And the third thing, which has the potential, but we don't have the capability on this part, but we have the demand, the government has the vision, But it is still, in my view, it is at least 5-7 years away till we start thinking about it. But the the point is, we should not get carried away with this narrative. The mistake that we do is, अरे हाई स्पीड ट्रेन, बुलेट ट्रेन भी बनने वाला है इंडिया में, तो कोई कंपनी आ गया फंड रेज के लिए, उसको अभी से पैसा दे दो. So that's the mistake which we should not do. The opportunity will materialize, but some companies, by deliberately or by choice or by accidentally, they are way ahead of their time. So we should not get caught up in such landmines, especially if the promoter's track record is not proven. So this is how they ramped up their bullet train program. So first train was run between Beijing and Tianjin. It was just a 120-kilometer line. It took 4 years to construct. Initially, they imported the train sets from Japan. 60 train sets were imported from Japan. Then they imported another 60 from Germany. Then they reverse engineered. They started assembling, started making their own components. Now they are making a fully made in China bullet train. Almost everything is indigenized. So first line was introduced in 2008. After 2017, they started running fully indigenized Chinese bullet trains. So even at China's speed and scale, it took them 11 years. So imagine how many years it will take to us. It is still 20-25 years away. I mean, for us to have a fully indigenized high-speed train. So till that time, we will have to import and indigenize. So even today, so China has total 5,000 train sets, 4,800 train sets. 1,200 are fully built in-house. The rest are assembled or imported from outside. So now they have just started exporting. Recently they got an export order from Indonesia. So this is where we are. But the difference is, see, their first corridor was 120 kilometers. Even we are being ambitious. Our first corridor is 508 kilometers. Even we are importing technology from Shinkansen, the same one. In fact, we are importing the latest one, the one which Japan itself is going to commercialize in 2029 or 2030. That's the train we will have at the same time. And we are also exploring other options as well. But how to play it as an investor? Nobody has any proven capability. But there are companies who are present in the Vande Bharat ecosystem. Eventually, can they upgrade themselves whenever this opportunity presents? Because Vande Bharat itself is like a 20-year program. We want to have, currently there are 15,000 trains which are running every day on Indian railway tracks. 15 or 14,000, it varies. The number varies between any given day. So eventually the target is to have at least 5,000 Vande Bharat trains. The program started in 2018 from 2 trains. Last year, October, we were at 70 trains. As we speak, last October to this October, we are at 140, 150 trains. So that's the speed at which we are moving. So Vande Bharat program is at a critical juncture and it will take off. So companies who are already present in this ecosystem, can they upgrade whenever the opportunity comes? So for example, who are the companies? Let's say BEML is doing something, BHEL is doing something. Then there are other private sector companies who are doing something or the other. Either they are making coaches or supplying components or whatever. So if you just study the current ecosystem and take a informed judgment on who all can upgrade, maybe there's an interesting play. So the company benefits for the next 10 years from this opportunity. And whenever the HSR opportunity comes up, they upgrade. So basically, क्योंकि markets में भी ultimately पैसा बनता है re-rating से और terminal value से. तो अगर किसी कंपनी को 15, 20, 25 साल की ग्रोथ अपॉर्चुनिटी है, विजिबिलिटी है, तो उनको ज़्यादा वैल्यूएशन मिलता है. सो द आइडिया इज टू आइडेंटिफाई अर्ली ऑन एंड एंटर इट एट एन अट्रैक्टिव वैल्यूएशन. अगर वैल्यूएशन अभी फेवर में नहीं है, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं, आप पढ़ के रखो, काम करके रखो, यू ट्रैक इट. In an adverse market, the opportunities will present themselves on platter. So this, I'm not saying ki these are the sectors and this is where all our money should be. These are one of the sectors where I think the ecosystem is falling in place. But even we are watching those sectors. We have exposure in one, but not in the other ones. So whenever the time comes, you scale up. There's no need to rush or chase the opportunities. And I'll just end with this slide. So this was 2016 PM Modi visiting Shinkansen factory. So in fact, in last 20 years, he has visited the factory and he has taken a tour of that train 4 times, twice as a CM, twice as a PM. In fact, Just in August 25, he was there. Just 2 months back, he took a ride, and then there because the negotiations on the how and when the train sets will arrive, they are still going on. So maybe they will send us some second-hand trains first for testing purpose, and then we will import a full Shinkansen train set which will run. Meanwhile, BML is also working on a high-speed train with a speed capability of 250 kilometers per hour. And if these trains don't arrive on time, then our plan is to run those trains, the BML run trains on this Mumbai-Ahmedabad corridor for certain sections and test it out. So the program may get delayed, but even Indian companies are preparing for this opportunity. So you never know. It can be a blessing in disguise. Just because Japanese are delaying their delivery, we might end up in developing something. And we are okay with 250 kilometers. It is still better than 70 kilometers for whatever we have today. That's it. Thank you very much.